Alright, so I decided to take one of my little paintings from my last video of my 8 mini oil paintings and do a full walkthrough of it because I had all of the footage for it. The unedited version of this footage is going to be available on Patreon for all the people who support me there. I started out by doing a pink acrylic background, which I know is kind of funny. I was experimenting with different ground colors for all of these paintings, and what I wanted was for some of that pink color to pull through when the oil paints that I'm using are a little more transparent. It's kind of an interesting choice, but I was experimenting with fun stuff and I actually kind of like how the pink started to show up behind the painting. But anyway, I'm starting out with drawing out the highlights of where the light is reflecting from the sky. This is often my first choice, I feel like, lately. Sometimes people prefer shadows, but I've been recently liking to first draw out my highlights, and then with that green I have blocking in the part of the water that is not as highlighted by the sky. For this painting, I had some pretty shallow and really vibrant water. You can see that I have this super pretty green coming in, and then I'm using a little bit of a lighter green just for some added, like, subtler highlights where the light is hitting not quite as directly as the original highlights that I drew. So I'm filling in basically all the spaces that were uncovered. Every little piece of pink I'm trying to fill up, but I'm still trying to let some of that pink come through because there'd be no point to having the ground color if I didn't. And I'm brushing it all out, and that way I have a nice blended, like, surface layer. I have a nice blended blocked in painting to start adding detail for it. This is always my first step right now. I do all the blocking in, and then from that point I start to add color on top. So when I started with here, after that first layer was done, I started to block in with a deeper teal, more of the rock texture that's sitting underneath the water on the surface of the sand. It's subtle, but I'm just really defining some more of the wave points with this and creating a little bit of texture and dimension to what's underneath the water. This is pretty shallow water, so I want to make sure that you're able to see some of those cool little things that are on the surface of the sand where you wouldn't see them as much if you had deep water. I'm also, with this color, trying to create some dimension to the movement of the water, making some streaks that are both in, like, horizontal and vertical passages, horizontal and vertical paths, I would say. With this water, there's so much movement. It's not one direction. You can see most of the direction is coming toward the viewer, but there's also a lot of movement in the water that's diagonal and just all kinds. So I'm having lots of different variations of streaks of highlight to show that the water is like, oh, Bindi's crying, water's in motion. Poor Bindi just went to the vet and got her teeth cleaned. I don't know if you can hear her on the audio, but whenever she gets, like, put under for anesthesia, she just cries for 3 days straight because she hates feeling druggy. It's very sad, and she's very sad, and I was like, baby girl, I have to go record a voiceover for a video, and so she's standing outside my door crying, and then we're gonna go snuggle afterward. So I switched to a lighter, not the lightest highlight, but definitely a lighter color, more of that reflected blue sky color. And I'm doing the same thing that I was doing with some of that darker teal in those streaks. I'm adding more texture to the surface of the water and the reflections. You can see me adding very carefully tiny little lines that are, like, basically mini versions of the big waves that I had blocked out initially. I blocked out, like, the initial biggest chunks and groups of waves, but within each of those waves are just thousands and thousands of mini waves. So that's what I was doing here. I was adding those back in. And then I decided to go back in with that highlight color. I'm covering up more of that pink. I think I ended up with this painting covering up more of the pink ground color than I wanted to. I kind of think I wanted more of it to show through, and it ended up showing through most, I think, in, like, the green of the water. But the highlights, it got filled in, especially in this layer when I started adding more highlights. But I really needed some more contrast for my highlighted section of the water. I had those in between highlights with that darker blue that's closer to the sky, and then I needed these really white, vibrant-y, well, it's not white, it's a light blue. I needed those to really create a more contrasted texture to show that these waves weren't really rolling. There was a little more jagged, and they're small. They're still very small waves, but I wanted to add that contrast and some of those points to the wave to show the movement in the way that I wanted to. I needed a little more contrast, so I ended up covering up more of that pink. I'm taking a sip of my Starbucks that I got on the way to picking up both dogs from the vet. And sweet Gooby also got his teeth done, but he's just a perfect sleepy angel. He's just like all drugged out, laying on his bed. Bean, on the other hand, it feels miserable. My poor baby. So with that color, I've kind of blended some areas too. Yeah, I've got a big blendy brush that I'm just smoothing everything out, keeping those waves really blended. I don't want them to be too jagged. This isn't like crazy stormy water. There's some smoothness to it. And I'm also not brushing it out so much that I lose that contrast and texture and those edges, because I want those to be there, but I don't want too much. So whenever I'm brushing stuff out, I'm making sure to be careful about how much, oh, she's crying, how much I brush out, because I definitely have accidentally overbrushed out things before, and I definitely have underbrushed things out and started to add detail and have been like, shoot, I wish I had done a brush over before I started adding these highlights. Oh, she's crying so hard. Okay, now you can see me starting to go in with more of a white. I believe this has a little bit of warmth in it. I added, can you hear that? Oh my God. Oh. Oh. Oh my God. So I'm bringing the lighter color in. It's a warm white. I just added a tiny, tiny little bit of yellow and a tiny, tiny little bit of red to add just a little bit of warmth to this white without it looking crazy. I don't want it to look like vibrant orange. But if I have some of that orange against the contrast of the teal, since they're complementary, not complementary. What do you call it when colors are, oh, Bindi. Oh, Bindi. Okay, I can't remember what it's called when two colors are across from each other on the color wheel. My brain is fried. I slept like 3 hours last night. I've been going all over town today with the dogs. Whatever that is, editor, put it on screen. Two colors across from each other. If I created a little bit of warmth in my white and then I made it that color. Oh my God, Bindi. A little bit of warmth in my white. I'm taking forever to explain this. A little bit of warmth in the white against the teal of the watercolor. Just adds really pretty colors to it. After I'd done those highlights, I got my tiniest brush I possibly could and went for a darker bluey color. This is things that are reflected on top of the water. I believe from my reference photo, oh sweetheart, I believe in my reference photo, these reflections on the water were from like a pole or a boat or something like that. I can't remember what was there, but it's just like a little something that is reflecting like a mirror on the water, and it looks very wiggly. Obviously it doesn't look like a pole or a boat. It's just a little bit of color that you're seeing on top of there. And then going back in again with that white, I think maybe with just a little more pure titanium white put in to get those highlights very, very, very defined. Just like very slowly, very carefully. I don't want to cover up too much of the other colors that I have highlighted. I want this to be used. Oh my God. What kind of tutorial is this? What kind of tutorial is this with a dog screaming in the background? She's just so upset about her feelings. She just feels so icky from going to the vet. Ay. Anyway, I keep adding that white detail in there. Adding in. And once I have all that white detail in, I kind of like the bulk of the painting is done, and I like to step back and get a little more of the bird's eye view from the painting and like take it all in from a distance, and that's when I start to go back in with details. So I decided to go for some darker teals to add a little more texture to that stuff that's on the sand, and create just make the what's underneath the water look a little more interesting, add a little more contrast to that too. I definitely wanted to heighten the contrast from the point I had on this painting. I also go back in with some more vibrant greens now that I have the layout of everything, and these are the reflections of the light, the refracted light through the water. So like the peaks of the waves kind of magnify the light, kind of like when you use a magnifying glass and all the light centers to one point. That's kind of what the waves are doing, and creating these big lines of just big chunks of light. And they're usually yellow, and sometimes they have rainbow colors in them depending on how deep in the water they are. These ones, the water was not so deep that you couldn't see the bottom, but also pretty deep, so the light that you're seeing was still pretty green. On top of the water surface, once we've got the light situated on the bottom of the sand, just whatever the surface of the sand is, I wanted more color. And just like I did with the white, where I added in a little bit of yellow and red to get some orange as the, what do you call that color thing? Contrasting color? What do you call it when a color is on the other side of the color wheel? I don't know, but I wanted some of that warmth in the sparkles that I was gonna add. I wanted a sparkly, reflecty kind of style that I saw in my reference photo. So I did tiny little taps of my orange, and then I also wanted these long, kind of like, you know, when you squint, or like you're like looking at light and you can see it's got lines on it like little sparkly diamonds. I wanted to add some of that in there too, so I did that. Oh my god, I'll get a video of her so I can put it in here so you can see her in action. But then I added in, on top, once I really liked the colors that I'd done for the center parts, not the center parts, once I really liked the colors that I'd done for like the aura, the like radial light around the sparkle, that's when, once that was done, I put the pure white inside the center. So it has that really, really bright, sparkly effect. I also used a brush without very much paint on it to extend out the lines from the sparkles. I just thought it was really pretty. It blended into it a little bit. It looks kind of like they're like fading out. I thought that was a very nice touch. But after that, adding a few more little thin lines. I'm getting close to the end. Adding a couple more. What else you got, Em? This painting looks done to me. What are you doing? Oh, I'm adding back in some red. A little bit more red, just making sure I like that there's enough of that color. Because it just makes the painting so much more interesting when you have multiple colors. I really love a monochromatic look. When I'm doing lots of paintings, I often do like monochromatic. It's kind of like this painting, mostly blues and teals. But when you add in another color and give it a little bit more of a rainbow spectrum with some oranges and yellows, it adds a lot of something. So that's my finished little tiny baby painting. Again, available for patrons, along with, I think I have another full-length version that I'll just add on there for patrons too. So I'll see you in the next video. And I'll get you a video of Bindi. You feel druggy because you went to the vet and got your teeth cleaned?